Hey everybody, Kate Payne here from Standing Out Online. I'm really excited to have you join me for Coffee with Kate today. I am excited to have PR expert Nancy Marshall with me to have coffee with me.
Cheers.
Cheers. Nancy, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Kate. And I love my coffee with Kate mug. It's just the right size. I've been using it every day.
Oh, good. I'm
I was
glad.
hoping that actually, because I've put it in the dishwasher so many times, I was hoping the logo wouldn't wear off.
Well, I hope it's not.
No, it hasn't. It's perfect.
Mine's not either. So it was funny when I had this idea to do this show, I thought, well, I need to get mugs and then send them to each of my guests. So it really does look like even though we're virtual, it looks like we're really having coffee together. So thank you for being here.
That was a very good PR idea.
Yes. Oh, and then we're here to talk about PR today.
You get 10 points for that one.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, so we're going to dig in. I think we're going to be getting a lot of people coming in here who really want to know about how they can be using PR in their business. For people who are on or know me and my background, my whole background is from PR. I was in PR for over 20 years, and I was both in for-profit and nonprofit. I got my start as a journalist at CBS Evening News with Dan Rather as an intern, and then realized that a career as a journalist wasn't really going to work well for me. So, like all journalists do, you turn to PR. So anyway, I went into public relations, and public relations back then, which would have been the early 90s, is very different from today's public relations. So tell me, Nancy, when you talk to people about sort of today's PR, how do you describe why PR is important in their business?
Well, PR helps you connect with your targeted audiences. And I think the difference between back then and now is now we start with identifying our avatar or the personas that we're trying to connect with. And you can actually even write a story about like who is the person you're trying to connect with. And then you use PR to convey your messages or tell stories on an ongoing basis to that avatar. Whereas back in the day, and you will remember, but I mean, my first PR job was in a public television station, and I made a list of all the newspaper editors around the state. And I like got in my car and literally drove around and went out to lunch with each of them. Actually, I still have a relationship with some of them. I mean, they're all like pretty old now.
Well, you bring up a good point, though. PR is another way to build relationships. I think a lot of people don't see it that way. I think they have visions of press releases and how to like get on TV and stuff like that. And there's just so much more to it, right?
Well, I think of marketing and PR as the art and science of building a relationship with your audience. As a matter of fact, I happen to have my book here, Grow Your Audience, Grow Your Brand. And I feel that in order to grow your brand, you need to have an ongoing conversation, an ongoing relationship in a variety of different places. And when I say places, I mean whether that's Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, or whether people are seeing articles about you in newspapers and magazines or stories on radio and television. So, but even back in the day, like in the 80s, when I first started out, we used to talk about kind of assaulting the senses of our people. And that's when I worked at Sugarloaf, the ski resort.
In Maine, right?
Yeah, I was the PR person there, starting in the mid 80s. And back then we were thinking about billboards in Boston. We wanted to have billboards that people would see while they were driving on I-93 on their way north out of Boston. Right. And we wanted them to read about us in the Boston Globe and hear about us on Channel 5 TV in Boston. But now we don't have to depend so much on the reporters and editors because we actually can become content producers ourselves. And I think that's a big shift is now it's great to have those relationships because the media outlets, obviously, their websites have great credibility and domain authority. But we also can use our own media outlets and create our own content and not depend on the reporters and editors.
Right. So before we go any further, we've got a couple people that have hopped on. Lisa Danforth, who I know you happen
Hi,
to
Lisa.
know.
That's great.
And Leanne, thank you for tuning in. She's saying hello to both of us as well. So I'll
Hi, Leanne.
pop her up here. And Lisa, thanks for tuning in as always. I appreciate it. In fact,
Hi,
Lisa's the one that introduced me to you, Nancy, at an Agents of Change conference in Portland, Maine, I think 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, that seems like ages ago, because I don't know about you, but I feel like the past year seems like 10 years.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Right. I know this whole year just feels so strange. Thank goodness for these technological tools, though.
I know. Actually, I was just writing about that. I was writing about, can you imagine if we had to go through the pandemic with no internet, like what that would have been like?
I don't think it would have been very pretty.
No.
Let's talk a little bit more about today's PR, because I think a lot of people, especially people who are more my age in their 40s and 50s, still think of PR, like I mentioned earlier, as like the traditional press release, where you write up a press release and you literally email it out, or back in the day when we used to fax it. Remember that?
Oh yeah, I remember
you'd put it on letterhead, and you'd have your lead and all of that, and the who, what, when, where, why. And this press release, I still think people are stuck in that mindset that there still needs to be a press release. And I don't think the press release, what I share to people, and let me know what you say, is that I say a press release is still a good tool for you to create, but you're not necessarily going to distribute it like you used to. First of all, a lot of news outlets just make sure that if you want to distribute a press release, you got to go into their form on their website and fill it out. They don't want you sending them a PDF.
Right.
So what do you have to say about that?
Well, I think a press release is just one tool in your toolbox. And I do think that a lot of times journalists like to have the press release, but it is just that, it's a tool. And I feel like almost anybody can create a press release. But I always say where the rubber hits the road is your ability to actually pitch that story to journalists. So I think media pitching is really important, and media pitching takes on a lot of different flavors depending on who the journalist is. And that's part of our job as PR people, is to know which journalists like you to contact them by email, which actually like an old fashioned, there still are people that like you to call them on the telephone.
Yeah, no, there are.
And there's some who like you to contact them through Twitter.
Right.
Or even pitching is happening on Instagram messaging now. So the key, I think, to being a really good PR person is to know how the journalists like to be contacted. And that's part of having a relationship with these journalists. And I feel that part of my success over the years has been building relationships. I really value that one-to-one. And I mean, even in the 80s, like I had databases where I would keep track of how exactly people wanted to be contacted then, whether it was by fax or in the mail or a telephone call. And of course, now there are so many more options.
Yeah, exactly. So you bring up a good point. I want to get to media pitching in a second, to let people know more by what you mean by that. But you also made a good point about it is so important that you understand who you want to send a pitch to. Like we used to call it back in the day, we used to say you need to know the reporter's beat. Like you needed to know, what do they cover? Do they cover crime? Do they cover business? What's the thing that they do? And that was back when the press pool was much bigger, and a lot of these places had beats with lots of reporters in each of them. Today, I think our press rooms are a little smaller, and people are covering more things, but there's still a way. How do people find out who to reach out to so that when they send a pitch, they know who to send it to, by whether it's by going to their website or whatever? What do you recommend?
Well, I use Twitter a lot. Twitter, I think, is kind of like a secret weapon for PR people today, because most journalists are on Twitter, and you can search on Twitter for that beat that you're looking to send your release or your pitch to.
Right.
And you can also start following people on Twitter and liking their stuff and commenting so that they recognize who you are. So you kind of build a relationship on Twitter before you go in for the pitch. you should be giving either recognition or a shout out or whatever, so that you're not asking for something right out of the gate.
Right, right. So tell us what you mean by pitching a journalist.
Okay, so again, we still do press releases we're working with a brand new restaurant right now, for example, and we did a press release, but it wasn't picked up that broadly. So now we're actually going one by one to journalists and following up, and sometimes with different angles. Like the restaurant we're working with is farm to table. So for some of the journalists, we know they're interested maybe in vegan cooking. So
Right.
we're contacting that journalist and saying this restaurant has quite a few options on the menu that are vegan. Or we're also, this particular restaurant is in a college town, and there are those that write about travel to college towns. And so we're contacting travel writers and following up. And so instead of something that being a blanket pitch or a blanket message, with a pitch, you're saying, hello, whoever, and using their name.
Right.
I know that you like to write about travel in college towns, and we have this hotel and restaurant in a college town. So you're making it more personal, and you're showing that person that you've done some homework.
Exactly. It's very important. You're going to, people need to remember that journalists, reporters get hundreds of emails a day with story ideas, and everybody thinks their idea is the best one.
Right.
Especially, I think a lot of people who are in the nonprofit arena. But they just get hundreds. And so when you show that you've done your due diligence, you've done your homework as to what they like to write about, and you followed them for a while, and given them shout outs and stuff, I think you're going to be more likely to have your pitch or your email looked at. Yes.
Yes. And sometimes you might be sharing a story idea that has nothing to do with a client. You might share a story idea because the journalist is interested in writing about casinos, and there's a new casino opening, but it might not even be a client. But having a few gimmies like that where you're sharing something. Or the other thing is, some journalists like to write about things in threes, especially those that have to cover national stories. So again, I talk about travel a lot. If you're representing a new museum, an art museum, for example, you might want to say, well, I'm representing this museum here in Maine. However, there's 2 other similar museums in Arizona and in Oregon that are similar. And Leslie.
Yeah, Leslie, but she just echoed what we're saying. Be a
that's
resource.
Awesome. I tell my team sometimes that we're like the servants to the media, and some people don't like to think of themselves like that, but we have to be of service and be a resource. And
well, Leslie, that's just made this comment. Leslie is the director of corporate underwriting support for Vermont Public Radio. So thanks for listening, Leslie, and thanks for your comment. But it's just so true. In fact, when I was coming up as a journalist over time, it was something that I naturally did, is that whenever I found a story idea that I thought this particular journalist or news outlet would appreciate, I would reach out. It had nothing to do with me. It had nothing to do with a client or with whom I worked. It was truly just out of literally being helpful. And then when it came time for me to ask something, they were already we had a connection, and they were appreciative because I wasn't always just about me.
Yeah, I always think about your bank account of goodwill.
Yeah.
And you want to start with a good balance in your bank account. And then, sometimes bad things happen. Sometimes you might be involved in a scandal or something bad. And it helps if you've already got a good bank balance so you can afford a withdrawal without going into the negatives.
That's an excellent analogy. In fact, let's touch on that just a little bit. In today's world of, social media and people posting stuff, and I don't want to get into the negatives too much, but we've seen a lot of, vitriol and things like that, whether it was, political, religious, whatever. People, I think, feel more comfortable saying something not very kind to people because they're not looking at them in the eye, right?
Right.
From a PR standpoint, if your business or organization or your place of business gets like a for example, let's just say a bad review. Let's say somebody went to your restaurant and they didn't like their meal, and then they go on social media, and normally your food's always just fabulous and everybody loves you, but somebody does something like this. Do people actually come to you as a PR agency to help them with something like this if it gets really out of hand?
Well, I do have a crisis communications division in my agency, and actually I have a partner who works with me who was 40 years with the Maine State Police doing crisis communications. So
Oh, wow.
that is part of our business. But in that example, if I own a restaurant and there's a really bad review, I would recommend going on and thanking the person, showing that you really appreciate the feedback and that you're paying attention, and then try to take the conversation offline so that you don't get into a back and forth. There's nothing worse than dickering back and forth with somebody in the comments. So I think it's appropriate to go on one time, again, show gratitude for the feedback. You know, this is not normal. We are always trying to improve. And I would like to learn more about it. So please call me here on my telephone number and give your number.
Yep. I think that's always, I've always told people that's actually an opportunity to show your level of customer service, your level of the fact that you simply do care, that you do want to help, and you'd like to, right the wrong, so to speak. But taking it offline is important. Playing it out, I don't think is anything that really needs to happen. Mostly people just want to be heard.
Oh yeah, I always say that a lot of those people they're like babies crying, like wah wah, come get me, mama, come get me, and they just need a little love.
They need a little control.
Attention. Yeah.
Right. All right. So let's talk a little bit about you and your agency. Just give us a little brief synopsis of how you actually created your own agency and the types of clients that you work with. Because I know you're in Maine, so I know you have a lot of Maine clients, but you also have some national clients.
Well, today actually is the 30th anniversary of my agency, like April 1st, 1991.
Well, we have to toast to that. We need to toast to that, Nancy. All right. Congratulations. And I had no idea.
It's been a lot of work. It's very fulfilling. I feel like I was born for this, and I'm so glad that I found a career that was made for me, or I was made for it. But so when I started 30 years ago, I had worked at Sugarloaf at the ski resort, and it got to the point where they just didn't want to continue paying me on a year-round basis, and they suggested, why don't you start an agency and we'll contract with you. And at the time, I was like, oh, you don't need me all the time. And thank you, Leanne. At the time, my feelings were a little hurt, but I'm so glad that this happened, because they identified me as an entrepreneur, and I really am an entrepreneur. So initially we were mostly working in tourism. We had the ski area, we had a rafting company, we had a windjammer that sailed the coast of Maine, and we had a Chamber of Commerce that put on a moose festival. So we were promoting that.
Of course, if you're in Maine, it's got to be something about moose, right?
Yeah. Or lobsters.
Or lobster, yeah. Lobster.
But then over the years, we started doing more economic development marketing. And then we developed what we call the Marshall Plan, which is our form of a strategic marketing communications strategy. And that's something that we do now. We like to do a Marshall Plan for a client as a way to get started, to really do that in-depth discovery and understand their targeted audiences and their competition and their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and establish their brand manifesto and create a message map, which is a really important tool that we use. So our clients now are in tourism, economic development, and a lot of government. We do a lot of municipalities, we've done counties, we've done state governments, and we've done some federal government work as well. So
when you're working with municipalities, I'm just curious, what kind of like PR work are you doing for municipalities?
We've done several of our Marshall Plans to help municipalities to define their unique brand and to attract more visitors, whether it's tourism or businesses, economic development.
Okay.
Our most successful municipality was the city of Saco, Maine.
I've been there.
Which we helped them. That we came up with a new tagline, which was "Friendly by Nature," because they had gotten a lot of national recognition for being like pet friendly and elderly friendly and family friendly, and so we knew they were friendly. And then they have a lot of natural attributes, like being on the coast of Maine, and so they're using their new branding, and then they developed a new website. And again, we helped them create their brand story and identify who their targeted audience was for tourism and for economic development. And they had tremendous success attracting new businesses and attracting new residents and growing the tax base. So that's essentially why municipalities like to do brand marketing of this type in public relations.
So you mentioned that people do the Marshall Plan. Can you just give us a snapshot of what the Marshall Plan is, just so that they have an understanding of it being a tool?
Yeah. I mean, we have this 65-step process. It's quite a complex process. We do it in 3 months. We start with a 3-hour discovery meeting where we go through everything that they have done in the past as far as marketing that has been successful or not. And then we talk about what are their goals and objectives. And then we get into, what kind of publicity coverage they've had in the past. And then what are their wildest dreams for the future? And, we're working with another municipality now that is very environmentally sustainable. They really want to be known for sustainability. Mm-hmm. So we're working on a new logo and a new tagline and new branding for this city to help attract more businesses that want to be environmentally sustainable.
So there really is an overlap between PR and marketing. I mean, especially if you work in a bigger agency or corporate environment or something, PR and marketing should be talking to each other.
Oh yeah, definitely. And sales too.
And sales
I
as well.
look at PR and marketing sort of set the stage so that when sales walks onto the stage, they can close business faster. Mm-hmm. So marketing kind of creates the backdrop and PR makes the connections. And then sales is the one that closes the sales that drive the revenue.
Right. When I was coming up through the PR ranks, I used to feel sometimes that businesses and organizations will look at public relations and PR as a nice to have, not necessarily a need to have. So in other words, if things got tight, a lot of times the PR division or the PR person got cut from the budget because they didn't see it as something valuable. What do you say to that?
Well, as soon as something really horrible happens and they have no relationships with the media, they're going to realize that it would have paid to have those relationships. I mean, having those relationships not only with the media but also with the public, it's priceless.
It is priceless.
Yeah. And I mean, I have such good relationships now with the media that they call me when they need a story, or when, right. I write columns for Maine Biz newspaper. And the other day, the editor contacted me because the digital editor is going to be out all week next week. And he just needs columns. He's like, please, can you write more how-to columns? And I'm like, sure, I can pump those out all day long.
What would you suggest to like the solo entrepreneur? Like the speaker, author, coach, business coach, and as far as like the building relationship piece, do you feel it's important for even the solo entrepreneur to reach out to certain channels on their own to do that because they don't necessarily have the agency or the resources for the agency?
It's even more important that person needs to be a thought leader. That person needs to be sought out the way you, Kate. I mean, you're the perfect example of someone who has you own the LinkedIn authority. You are known for that. So, you are definitely a thought leader. And I actually
Thank you. I didn't expect that, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have carved out that space and you chose that niche, and you put your stake in the ground as an authority on LinkedIn. And that was a very smart thing to do. So, I mean, when people think of LinkedIn authorities, they think of Kate Payne.
Well, I mean, I hope so, but there's certainly a lot of others out there as well. But for the person who is, like a business coach or has written a first book or is in the process, and obviously they're a thought leader in a certain space too, is it worthwhile for them? Should they be reaching out to their journalists in their own community, or should they be reaching out to national? I think there's some confusion sometimes. Like, I also think sometimes, especially we as women, sometimes I think we sometimes think a little small, and we think, oh, well, if I tried to reach out to national, that's not going to happen. But I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it kind of goes back to the following them on Twitter, like you said earlier. But what would be one or two things they could do to start building those relationships as a solo entrepreneur with journalists?
Well, again, you want to be findable online. So it's probably going to be easier to reach out to the editor of your local business newspaper and either offer to write a column or say, I've just won this award or whatever, and try to get some publicity locally. I think of it in concentric circles. So, if you live here, just start with the media in your immediate area and then keep building out and out. But once you've got some articles and some, you want to have your name show up on a lot of different websites, not just your own site. But once you've got some links on some other publications and media outlets, then you can reach out even to the Wall Street Journal. I mean, they like to have contacts and examples from local communities around the country. So, I mean, you're not going to get a story in the Wall Street Journal every time you contact them, but it's going to build the relationship, and they'll remember you, especially if you're responsive and you're of service to them.
Right. I agree. I always suggest people start small, start with where you are more likely to have some success. And then as you start, and then once you get those opportunities, make sure that you're putting them on your website, make sure that you're putting them on your LinkedIn profile, because then when people do find you, maybe through a search, you've already started to establish some authority. They can hear you speak, they can tell that you're articulate, or they can read your article and know that you're a good writer and that you obviously are knowledgeable about your topic. So I agree with you, like build it out. And it's like I say about using LinkedIn, it's a slow dance to do this too, because it takes a while to build relationships. It takes a while to build the authority, and you got to be patient. It's not going to be this overnight success. There's a guy in my LinkedIn user group, Andy Foote. I've interviewed him on this show before. And as Andy Foote said, it took me 10 years to become an overnight success.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, what we all have to think is people need to know you, like you, and trust you in order to want to do business with you. So, I mean, doing business with you and imparting money, hard-earned dollars, there has to be a certain element of trust. If they think you're a scam artist, they're not going to spend money with you. So, we all know scam artists. I mean, I get contacted by so many of them online all the time. And you can just tell, you could just smell it,
It makes you feel oogie just reading it. Yeah.
Yeah. But we're not like that because we value personal relationships and we have integrity and we have good reputation, and, we work every day. I'm talking for you and me and all of our listeners, I'm sure, who, that they really take their reputation seriously, because your reputation is, I mean, again,
I always say your personal brand equals your reputation, and your reputation is made up of your integrity, your values, and certainly your professional expertise. How you want to be known for what you do, that top of mind awareness thing. So your reputation really matters. So for anybody who's listening, if anybody has any questions, anything, and remember, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Please ask anything, because PR is one of those areas, I've been in it a long time, that people just don't necessarily really understand. They're like, is it marketing? Is it this? And it's a little bit of a lot. But I think Nancy's helped really illustrate what it is. Let's talk a little bit more. If people pop in with questions, I'll put them up on screen. Let's just talk a little bit about, so my favorite area is LinkedIn. And I like to help people when they're working on their LinkedIn personal profile. My biggest piece of work first is, before we even get to LinkedIn, is that we talk about their personal brand. Because a lot of times people sort of know what it is, but they don't know how to package it. They don't know how to write about it. They don't know how to message it. They don't know how to position it. So that's some of the first work we do, is like, let's really make sure we understand who you are, what you do, and how you help, so that you know that, so that when you talk about it through your website, your blog, or your LinkedIn profile, you talk about it in a way that is confident and succinct and helpful. So when I'm working with certain people on their LinkedIn profile, I'm saying to them, you know what? Also think of your LinkedIn profile, your personal profile page, as a PR tool. Because if people find you, and like if a journalist is doing research and they're maybe considering you as a source, or if they've happened upon you through a Google or LinkedIn search, the better your LinkedIn profile is, the better you're serving that journalist. Can you speak to anything about that?
Sure. Well, first of all, I should say that you helped me with my LinkedIn, which was a wonderful process to go through. And I thank you for doing that. And one of the reasons that LinkedIn is so important is it is a great, big, reputable website with high domain authority. And again, people might be confused about what domain authority is, but basically, a big site like the Wall Street Journal site or like LinkedIn that are curated and they're professionally edited and maintained, and they're kept current. Those sites will show up sooner in a Google search than a little a podunk newspaper that maybe doesn't really update very often.
Right.
So that's one thing. And then your personal brand. Oh my gosh, I could talk all day long about your personal brand, but
we could talk for hours, couldn't we?
I love personal branding. And I actually should give a shout out to William Arruda, who is a thought leader in the area of personal branding. And he had a company called Reach Personal Branding that offered certifications in personal branding and social personal
branding. Does he
branding.
still have it?
He sold the company. There still is. It's now called Career Thought Leaders. And it's a little more HR oriented, I believe. But he told me that I was the person that had taken all of his principles and applied them to PR the best or the most. And
for years I followed his blog and followed him and watched his webinars and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually through him, I realized, because I have kind of a very extroverted personality. And for years, I thought when I was like professional, I had to be like more buttoned up and like suppress who I really was. And then because of him, and actually with a little bit of listening to Oprah and Gayle King, those people helped me accept that I can put it all together. Because that makes me stand out.
Yes.
Because I am known for my enthusiasm and for my very loud laugh. And, I am a very extrovert. I'm all the E's: energetic, extroverted, enthusiastic. So I've made that all part of my personal brand.
Well, and it's not even that you even necessarily had to make it. It's because it's who you are. So you actually embraced it.
Yeah, I did. Because I used to kind of I used to say, well, I have my private life, and then professionally I was like trying to be a little more buttoned down, and now I'm just showing myself as I am,
which I think our world does now. I think that's one night, and in fact I think that's actually, if there's an upside to the pandemic, I think one of the things, just because we've all been on Zoom and we've all been locked down, that we're all letting ourselves literally and figuratively be more of ourselves. Online.
One person who does a good job of that is Ginny Dietrich of Spin Sucks. I don't know if you've ever interviewed her, but if you haven't, I
do. I know Ginny. I met her at Agents of Change.
Yeah, and she is somebody who I really admire, because she puts it all out there and has been sharing daily, how life in quarantine has been the past year.
She did a post on Facebook every single day, all 365 days of lockdown day, whatever. And she did a really lovely wrap up on 365 because she was like, I'm still going to post, but I'm not going to do it daily. Ginny, Gini Dietrich, Dietrich. I can't put it in the comments because it won't show on LinkedIn. And Spin Sucks is her business and her book is phenomenal. And it's this by the same name, Spin Sucks.
Yeah.
In fact, what a nice segue you just gave me.
Okay.
Ginny writes a lot about a PR term that we should explain to people, and it's called the PESO model: paid, earned, search, and what's the O?
Organic.
Organic, yeah. So before we get there, though, I just wanted James Tucker, who is thanks for joining us, James. He is in Europe, I believe. And he pops into Lisa's LinkedIn Lives and mine often, and so I appreciate that. So
he has a nice big smile too. I like that, James.
He does. oh, thank you, James. I didn't even read it before I put it up there, but thank you. I'm humbled and appreciative that you shared that, and I'm glad it's helped you stand out. Bob Farnham is a personal friend of mine. Actually, he loves Ginny. If Bob was live right now, he would say something about a story he has with Ginny that I think it was over Twitter or something. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bob. That somehow, some way, you're going to cook dinner for her someday. And that's a little kind of an inside joke that Bob has with Ginny when they're posting things online. So another example, actually, by what I just shared with you, of people building relationships with people online. Especially if they're in that world where you want to learn more, because then you create that relationship that is so cements what you want to do in business going forward, whether it's an ask or a give.
It speeds up. It just like I said previously, that PR and marketing set the stage to speed up the sale. Just having a relationship speeds up accomplishing whatever you want. For example, I have a very good relationship with the Associated Press bureau chief here in Maine. And I mean, we actually, we're not on first name basis. We're on a last name basis because that's what the old newsroom people used to. So
exactly.
His name is David Sharp. So, when I have a story idea, I can just say, Sharp, what do you think about this? And he's very honest with me. Sometimes he doesn't like all my ideas, but he responds very quickly. Because we have that relationship, he pays attention if I contact him.
I've built that too to this day. I don't call in ideas as much, mostly because just my clients are all over the world. So I'm not as sort of Vermont centric as I used to be. But I still, I sometimes just reach out and just say, hey, I was thinking of you today. Hope you're well. Hope you're making it through the pandemic, and had nothing to do with a news story.
Yeah.
Again, it's just showing that you care about people or something. So back to the PESO model: paid, earned, search, organic. Ginny writes about it a lot in Spin Sucks. Describe what that is so that in a 101 way.
Well, these are all different ways that we can communicate our key messages to our targeted audiences. So, again, a Marshall Plan strategy would include all these various pieces. So paid would be paid advertising. So that could be either traditional advertising, buying ads on television or radio or in the newspaper or magazines, or paid social. So you can do paid Facebook
ads and
Instagram. Every social take. And then earned is what traditionally we've done in PR, which is getting articles in the media. So that's called earned media. Then search is standing out online. So showing up when people search either for your name or search for something that you do. You want to be the one that shows up first. If somebody's looking for a plumber or an electrician or a career counselor, you want to be the one that Google identifies as being the best match for that person who's searching.
So keywords are really important that in your content, the keywords you're using on your website and in your social.
Yeah, keywords, but don't do keyword stuffing.
No, I don't mean keyword stuffing. No.
Yeah.
No, but knowing what the keywords are for your space, for your industry, and incorporating those words in organically in your language, in your posts, your blogs, your vlogs, and your website.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And showing up online in a lot of different places too. I mean, you can't just rely on your own website. That's
Right.
another reason for using all these other methods. So
Channels.
the final letter in the PESO model is O for organic, and that's what we call organic search. So in order to come up in organic search, you need to have good SEO, which is using keywords.
Right.
And also, Google looks at the intent of a searcher too. Like, Google is so smart. I always say Google is like Santa Claus, and Google knows if you've been bad or good and will either reward you or punish you accordingly.
Well, that's true. I always used to say a Google slap, like,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
keyword stuff, you're going to get a Google slap. So
Exactly. You're going to get punished.
it'll ding you.
Yeah.
But
I want to go back to personal branding for a second too. And one of the big things about having a strong personal brand is you want to be the one that shows up when people are searching for the thing you do. So if you're a lawyer, say you're a criminal lawyer, you want to be the criminal lawyer who shows up when somebody searches for that, or sign maker. You want to be the one. And again, it's a long slog to get there. You have to be creating content in a lot of different ways on an ongoing basis. This is one of the things that I love the most about the new PR is just content creation. And I have to say, I'm a little obsessed with it. I just think about it all the time. It's like, oh, I want to write an article about, pitching, or I want to write an article about SEO or whatever. And I love doing that. It's a lot of fun.
Well, one of the things that you do, based on what you just said, is that you write, you have some kind of a relationship with Forbes where you write articles for Forbes. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm part of the Forbes Agency Council, and I contribute a column every month. And so that's part of my thought leadership strategy. And of course, the Forbes brand is a powerful and strong brand.
Yeah. Cachet. Yep.
And then Forbes itself then shares my articles too with their audience, and then I'm able to share it with my audience. So yeah, and those articles are highly curated. Like, they spend a lot of time, first of all, fact checking to make sure everything's accurate and making sure that it's all original thought.
Right.
And I can't just go in there and promote my own clients or my own brand. It has to be helpful to the audience. So that goes back to the being helpful and being a resource in everything we do.
Right. All right, let's shift gears a little bit because we're getting toward the end. So I just want to remind people. So if anybody has a comment about something they've done that's been PR oriented in their business, put it in the comments. Or if you have a question for Nancy about PR or tool maybe, or a strategy or methodology, certainly ask the question. But let's just switch gears a little bit. So Nancy, a couple of years ago, you actually took a big, bold move to create your own podcast called The PR Maven, which I love. Tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, so I created it in 2018, and it has become a big part of my business and my life. I had to look at, what do I like doing the most? And I like exactly what we're doing right now, talking.
Right.
So, and it's a really great way, again, to position yourself as a thought leader, and also to affiliate yourself with other thought leaders. So, for example, John Lee Dumas, who's from the state of Maine originally and very well-known author and speaker, and he actually has a daily podcast called Entrepreneurs on Fire. So I've had him on my podcast. But I also interview current and prospective clients as well. So it's a really great way to nurture client relationships and sales, because it's very flattering to a person to have them on your podcast. I mean, I'm very flattered to be on your podcast today. And it's a way, again, to show your association with that person. I mean, you've done an amazing job promoting this podcast with me. leading up
Actually
to
a
it.
webcast, just because I don't have a formal podcast, but so just
Webcast.
just so I don't confuse anybody.
Yeah. So yeah, my podcast was audio only until literally today. I'm doing my first 2 podcasts with StreamYard. So it is going to be audio and video as well this
Yep.
afternoon.
That's what I'm using, StreamYard, right now. I love StreamYard.
I would have never thought, it's like, again, it's like one of the other changes that we've made in the past year. Here I am in my home office and I'm going to be broadcasting from right here.
Well, I was flattered when you invited me to be one of your first guests, right when you started your podcast. I think I was episode 8.
Yes, and you're still in the top 10 of the most
really?
popular ever. Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
When I check the rankings, I think you're right in the top 10 still.
Well, you had your 1-year anniversary, and I think you were having a little gathering in Maine, and I was literally had it in my calendar and was going to try to get there, and then something came up last minute, and I could not, because I was so excited for you that you had done that. And I love the name PR Maven. So who's like an ideal listener to listen to your podcast?
I find that there's a lot of people that are in-house marketing managers or PR people working for companies. And I think they dream of perhaps having their own agency or own business someday. So my ideal listener is somebody who is kind of maybe stuck in a job that they don't love.
Mm-hmm.
And then they see me smiling and having so much fun doing what I do. And they're like, wow, that seems pretty appealing. So that is one ideal listener. The other ideal listener is somebody who has their own business and knows that PR would help them, but isn't really sure how to do it exactly.
Right. So, if somebody wanted to talk to you about, the work you do for them, do you have basically, like, is it just sort of one level of service, or can you do, like, if it's a small business, you have a service that's more in line with a small business, and then you've got the Marshall Plan and the things for maybe the bigger business or organization? Is there anything you can share with us about that? Like, what type of people you serve best?
We actually serve companies best that have an in-house PR or marketing person who needs the support, kind of like of a department behind them. We probably aren't that ideally suited for a startup. We're more suited for either an established business or a municipality. And we like to have that in-house person. For example, one of our clients right now is Puritan Medical Products, which is the only manufacturer of the swabs for COVID-19 testing in the whole United States. And one of only 2 manufacturers in the world that can make those, they're called flock tip swabs for COVID. Mm-hmm. And they're located here in the state of Maine, but they're expanding very fast.
I'll bet.
And they have an in-house marketing person who really didn't have much PR experience at all. So I'm kind of like her confidant. We talk on a daily basis, and I'm helping them to kind of navigate. I'm helping them sort through all the media requests that they get and help them decide, which ones to take on, and then doing media training and coaching with their executives. And that's really an ideal client for us.
Okay, great. So as we're wrapping up, I know one of the things that we've both talked about that I think we would preach it until the cows come home is that building relationships matter. Building relationships with the press, with journalists, with your client, everybody. I mean, building relationships across the board. But so other than that, what would be one of your top 1 or 2 takeaways for people today about using PR in their business, regardless of the size of their business?
Journalists are human beings, and just like any human being, they like to be acknowledged. So before you reach out to them, they want you to have read some or watched some of their stories and to know what they're interested in and acknowledge some of their previous work, not just go in for the kill to get your story.
Exactly.
And like all human beings, they like to be thanked for doing something. So I am a huge advocate of thank you notes. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting here at my desk and I have big stacks of note cards here and piles of stamps, and I write thank you notes all the time. And I actually save the notes that I get. So I have big piles of mail here because I like to look at it, and I'm sort of a pen pal person. I write and receive letters from a lot of people, and they mean a lot to me. And I think that letter writing is sort of a lost art.
I agree.
And you'll really stand out from the crowd if you write a handwritten note and send it in the mail, as opposed to texting or email. A thank you.
And if you don't do the note, though, because I'm friends with several journalists, even an email thank you is still appreciated too. It's better than nothing. Just showing that you appreciate that they took the time and made the effort. And it's just, it goes a long way, because it can be a pretty thankless job, and the news cycle is so fast in this day and age because of social media. Things are happening like this all the time.
Which brings me to one other point. The news cycle is so fast, and there aren't that many reporters who specialize in one specific beat. So you need to sort of educate people about your story. So you can't assume that a reporter has a lot of knowledge about your industry when they come to do a story. It's a good idea to, again, give them some background and feed them the sound bites that will go into their story. And sound bites are really useful. Journalists don't like it if you just blather on and on and on, because then they have to pick out what are the most important points.
Being to the point and concise, and it takes some time to learn that.
Yes,
so it does. I mean, it took me a long time to realize that, and I try to use that even in my interviewing like this in this setting. Is number one, be a good listener, try not to interrupt, and number two is to let people share what they need to share. Now, one of the things I've learned from interviewing is if somebody starts to go on too long, there's ways where you can gently insert and go, hey, you just made a good point there. Can I interject for a moment and let's unpack that a little bit? Like, that's not necessarily an interruption. It's just that sometimes we tend to, especially when we get excited about our topic, we can start to go on a little too long or go off on a tangent. And so it's my responsibility as a host to sort of bring it back to what we were talking about. I'm not saying you did that at all, Nancy.
Yeah,
but I'm just echoing. I'm echoing what you're saying about that. Journalists, they appreciate the love.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. So as we end, tell us a little bit about tell us how people can reach you. So obviously they can connect with you on LinkedIn, and let Nancy know that you connected with her through being on Coffee with Kate. Any other ways they can connect with you or learn from you?
Well, email me at nancy@prmaven.com, and that's MAVEN. You can listen to my podcast on all the major podcast players, the PR Maven podcast. Yeah, and you can get it off of my agency website there. And I'm on all the social media all the time.
What's your handle?
Well, on Instagram, I'm Maine PR Maven, MAINE PR Maven.
Okay.
And I have kind of become more of an Instagrammer than, I do Facebook still too.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a problem, but I justify it because I need it for my business. But I really
there's Clubhouse, which is another whole thing. So we won't go there, but
I was born a social person, and I sometimes say social media was created just for me because it allows me to socialize 24/7.
I know. I've said the same thing for me. I used to do a lot more than I do now because I started to sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say I'm holding myself back. I'm just, I guess I'm just more judicious with what I put out there. I used to, when it was fairly new, I felt like I put out everything because that's what people were doing. And I was like, I guess I don't need to put that out there.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So anyway, Nancy, I can't thank you enough for having coffee with me today.
Yes, thank you. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you very much. And I appreciate you making the time. And everybody, please, if you have any questions, put them in the comments, because this will show up as a replay. And I will be putting it out over the next few days for people to see the replay. So if you have questions, not too late to ask, even if you watch the replay, put them in the comments, either tag me or Nancy, and one of us will be sure to answer your question. So thank you again, Nancy. Okay.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.